Hey, 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 everybody. Happy Monday, Monster Truck Rally. And welcome back to the stream. I am so glad that you guys are here and ready to kick off another phenomenal week with me. Clearly, I'm running very low on sleep, but I'm really proud of myself. I got up this morning super early. I went to the new gym that I joined, did leg day way too hard, had 3 cups of coffee so far, been setting up the home studio, and life is good. Life is chef's kiss today. I hope you guys had a phenomenal weekend despite all of the insane news going on over the weekend that we're going to be breaking down today on the stream. Definitely want all of your guys' opinions on what you think may or may not be imminently happening with the border crisis in Texas and potentially the brink of civil war in America. We got a lot to talk about. Plus, just want to say hi to all of you newcomers who may be joining us on the stream for the first time ever. We are growing like crazy everywhere in all of our communities. Thanks to you guys every single time you hit that follow or subscribe button and help us continue to grow these independent channels one person at a time. If you are new around here, I promise it doesn't always look like this. We are working on getting a great setup ready for you guys for the stream every single day. But if you have not been following along since November 15th, I was dealing with apartment insanity is like the nicest way that I can possibly say that. My apartment on the 19th floor here in South Florida flooded because the building that was brand new, I was one of the first tenants in it, wasn't constructed properly and the sealants on the windows weren't properly installed. So ended up dealing with like 2 months of flooding and being like halfway displaced from my apartment. Luckily, none of my equipment for the stream was ruined. Thank goodness. That was like divine intervention right there. But eventually it was just time to move. Like it was way past time to get a new stable living environment and a new home studio all set up for you guys. So that takes time. And I figured since we've been streaming since September of 2022, it's time for a new studio setup. We're going to mix some things up. We're going to have some fun with it. Out with the old, in with the new. We all need a good change of perspective every once in a while. I said this on People of the Internet, which is the live show that I co-host with Dave Rubin Monday through Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern earlier today, that when you were a kid and you just needed like a whole new life and a whole new fresh start and a whole new change of perspective and you just had to redo your room, like rearrange your room. I did this probably every like 3 to 6 months as a child. I just needed a new setup in my room, and changing the way that your furniture is arranged is the easiest way to do that as a kid. So my mom would come into my room probably every 3 to 6 months and be like, what the hell are you doing? But I would be moving all of the furniture in my room all by myself to change what wall the bed was on, where my desk went, where the dresser was going. I just needed a change of perspective. And I guess that's exactly what we're doing here with the new home studio setup. So obviously it looks a little crazy. There's boxes and all kinds of stuff everywhere. I do have to get your guys' opinion on something. I don't know if I should wait till the end of the stream. Nah, we'll do it right now. I'll get your opinion on something related to what might go in the home studio setup. I have to know, I put this on my Instagram story as a poll, if I'm completely unhinged for wanting to do this. I basically want to include in the background of the stream all things that pertain to me and my personality and all the fun things that make Isabel, right? And so I'm doing all kinds of fun stuff. I've got plans for Star Wars and Harry Potter and my faith and the mountains and all kinds of stuff. But my favorite movie for a long time when I was a kid was Napoleon Dynamite. And I have to know if you guys think this print on the wall for my stream, like back there in a fun little gallery wall, is this completely unhinged or is this cool? Like, would you see that in the background and be like, WTF, what is this girl thinking? Or would you see this in the background and be like, yes, Napoleon, get up, make yourself a dang quesadilla. I think it's awesome, but I feel like half of you are probably going to be like, what is wrong with this chick? She's psychologically insane. I am. So on that note, welcome to the stream, Tina, you fat lard, and come get some dinner. We have a lot to unpack today, so don't forget to utilize our live chat throughout the entirety of the stream today. That might be right below you or right off to the side, depending on where you guys are watching. And do me a huge favor right at the get-go of this conversation and hit that like button if you haven't already to bring more people into the debate, because I'm dying to know what you guys think is going to happen over this like Old West style standoff at our southern border right now. and half of the states siding with Texas, the other half of the states not getting involved and or siding with the feds. So don't forget to weigh in on the debate in that live chat throughout everything. Just as a reminder, every single day, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, we are live on YouTube, on Rumble, on Facebook, on Getter, on Locals, and on Instagram now as well. So wherever you guys are, if you're joining us for the first time or you just have forgotten to the last couple of times that you've watched the stream, smash that follow or subscribe button to make sure that you never miss a stream. Joe just asked in our Instagram chat, where's Uncle Rico? He's busy throwing a football over the mountains. Okay, so he's not on the back wall, but maybe Napoleon will be. And vote for Pedro while we're at it on the PSAs of life. So, as I mentioned, today we are starting the stream by talking about what's happening at the southern border. And this is like a really fascinating subject to unpack because up until yesterday, nobody was really talking about what was happening as a development after the Supreme Court decision came out last week, other than social media. Like, nobody in the mainstream media had any interest whatsoever in touching this story with a 10-foot pole until essentially yesterday. But this all started about a week ago when the Supreme Court of the United States issued a decision on an ongoing piece of litigation that has been going back and forth between the state of Texas and the Biden administration. And essentially what happened with all of that, and we're going to go through all of the nitpicky details, but I'm just giving you the 30,000 foot overview first. Essentially what happened with that is in a very close decision, 5 justices to 4 justices, the Supreme Court of the United States said that the state of Texas cannot put up razor wire to block entrance to manage the border from the federal government, who has jurisdiction over Border Patrol, ICE, which is Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, etc. So essentially they said, and I actually don't entirely disagree with the decision. There's a lot of people who do, and we're going to unpack that at length, but they essentially said border security for the federal national border of our country is under the jurisdiction of the federal government, not the state government. So whatever the federal government policy is, constitutionally speaking, a state cannot block the federal government from upholding and adhering to their constitutional obligation to manage the border. Now, of course, we know that the Biden administration and the federal government currently in America has essentially no jurisdiction of the border whatsoever other than create absolute pandemonium and create chaos. They have no desire whatsoever to manage the border. All they want to do with the border is open it wide open for as many people to come in as humanly possible. And they've made this abundantly clear. The reason that this entire conversation about razor wire even got started, we'll watch a video of this here in a second, is that the feds were putting together opportunities to open the border quite literally using forklifts, like construction materials, forklifts to lift up razor wire that was put there by the Texas state government to let migrants, illegal immigrants, come through en masse. So that's their priority here, is to let in as many people as humanly possible. They have no interest whatsoever and have made this abundantly clear that in actually managing the border or enforcing immigration whatsoever, what they really want to accomplish here, as I drop my phone, what they really want to accomplish here is to create as much chaos as humanly possible. So you might disagree with the policies of the Biden administration. You might disagree with how the Biden administration is handling, or not handling, so to speak, immigration in totality. I share those concerns. I share that disagreement with where we are at in terms of immigration enforcement in America. However, the constitutional question that was in front of the Supreme Court last week was, do states have the jurisdiction under current law? Remember, the Supreme Court and the judicial system in America can't, or at least isn't supposed to, supersede any existing law. They can't create any existing law. All they can do is interpret the law that already exists that is right in front of them. If we want to create new laws, that happens through amending the Constitution, or that happens through the legislative branch in Congress. So they cannot make a new law if they don't like something. All they can do is interpret what's right in front of them. And I believe they correctly interpreted the constitutional question that was right in front of them. Do states have the constitutional right to supersede policy from the federal government? No. If you remember first grade civics, what kind of country do we live in? What's our system of governance? If you remember watching any of the I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill videos that are actually still on Disney Plus, by the way. I went and binged every single one of the Schoolhouse Rock videos the other day, and it was a lit time. It's like the only good stuff still on Disney Plus, if we're being honest. But if you remember any of those videos, you'll know that we live in a system called federalism in the United States, meaning the federal government has higher jurisdiction than the state government, which has higher jurisdiction than local governments. So even though something might be legalized at the local level, if it's illegal at the federal level, that's still enforceable. And that's the law that trumps state law and Trump's local law. We all know that very basic information. So we might disagree with where federal law is at right now, or how federal law is being enforced right now, or lack of enforcement completely. But the way that everything currently stands under the United States Constitution, Texas as a state, the same way New Mexico or Arizona or California as a state, wanting to enforce their own border policies in some degree, if it's in conflict with the federal government, federal law trumps state law. That sucks. I hate that, but that's just the way that it is, constitutionally speaking, in our system of federalism. So just as a reminder, I wanted to go through the actual nitty-gritty of this with you just to get to where we're going now and where we've arrived this week. This was last week. Last Monday, the Supreme Court of the United States ordered Texas to allow federal border agents access to the state's border with Mexico, where Texas officials had deployed miles and miles of razor wire. The order did not explain the justice's decisions. For now, they're saying it effectively upholds long-standing court rulings that the Constitution gives the federal government, not state governments, but federal government, sole responsibility for border security, which is true. That is existing constitutional law in the United States. We could create a constitutional amendment to change that in the future, but when it came to the constitutional question in front of the justices a week ago today, they had to answer. They were obligated to answer that this is existing standing law. This is where precedence is. This is how the Constitution of the United States was written. And as it stands today, the feds have jurisdiction. Importantly, in October of last year, this is how this all got started. The state of Texas sued the feds, sued the Biden administration, after Border Patrol agents started cutting the wire that the Texas government had put up along the border. They argued that the Department of Homeland Security destroyed state property of Texas and interfered with Texas's border security efforts, even though their efforts are not constitutionally granted to them as a state. That is constitutionally granted to the federal government. Again, I said it was a very, very, very close decision. It was a 5-4 decision, and a lot of conservatives were highly criticizing Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who was the swing vote on this one, swinging with the 5. But I actually would argue, far before I am a conservative, far before I am anything politically, far before I vote for any party, I'm a constitutionalist. I believe in the system that our founding fathers put in place in 1776, and I genuinely believe that this type of system makes sense for a reason, that federalism, when executed properly, makes sense for a reason. Unfortunately, our systems have been completely manipulated and hijacked by people who don't believe in the system that was created and are trying to manipulate and change them as much as they possibly can, from the executive to the legislative branch and everything in between. But I believe Amy Coney Barrett did her job as a Supreme Court justice. She answered a constitutional question that was right in front of her. She didn't try to create new policy. She didn't try to create new laws. She said, this is the question and I have to answer it, and I will answer it accordingly, according to the last 200 plus years of United States history, policy, and law. So all of this erupts last week, right? Everybody starts freaking out. People start calling Supreme Court justices traitors to the country, that they're traitors to their party, even though Supreme Court justices are trying to be neutral from all of these things. Historically, that's always been their obligation, to remain politically, partisanly neutral and just answer constitutional and legal questions from a non-biased opinion. Obviously, that has been hijacked quite a bit in the last several decades of American history, but historically, that has always been their obligation and their responsibility. And now things have started to heat up. So let me just reiterate for the zillionth time, I 100% want to blow my brains out every single time I see a video of hundreds of thousands of people crossing our border scot-free, being handed a smartphone and a first-class plane ticket, being told they can live in a rent-free apartment community all the way in Maine because that makes sense, that we know these people are given court dates that they don't actually have to show up to. Like, it's just absolute pandemonium. And I have lived in 2 southern states in the last couple of years. I've been in Arizona for the last 3 years, where I have witnessed the insane immigration policies of the Biden administration, upfront and personal, very, very close and personal, in particular in the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, where I travel for work several times a week sometimes. Almost every single time I was getting on a plane, there were undocumented migrants, illegal immigrants, mostly 20-something-year-old men who didn't speak any English. Charlotte to Boston to DC or anywhere else. I've witnessed the rise in violent crime in Tucson, in Phoenix, and everywhere in between, where things have just gotten absolutely out of control. And now here in Florida, I moved to Florida in March, I've witnessed a total cultural shift on immigration, where actual legal immigrants to the state of Florida and the United States of America, who are everywhere, by the way. For most people in South Florida, their first language is not English. Their first and only language is Spanish. I actually feel more immersed in Spanish here than often I do visiting Europe, where everybody speaks English as well. These people hate illegal immigration. They vehemently despise illegal immigration, and it is 100% not tolerated in South Florida because all of these people have gone out of their way to legally immigrate at every possible opportunity that they could to the United States. So it makes me want to punch myself in the face every single time I see one of these insane headlines or these videos of hundreds of thousands of people coming into our country, or the rise in crime statistics, or all of the down trickle effects to Biden's disastrous border policy that we all predicted when he was elected president of the United States. But I don't think the Supreme Court failed America. I don't think the Supreme Court was like a traitor somehow to the United States. They had to answer who has jurisdiction over the border. That's it. That was the only question that they got to answer. And the answer to that is the federal government. Now, I think the state of Texas and every other state should sue the feds again and say, you are failing to uphold your constitutional obligation to manage the border because you're just straight up not managing it. You're creating absolute chaos and absolute pandemonium in our country. But that's a completely, wholly separate constitutional question that would require a different case before the Supreme Court in order to be answered. Okay, that's just like baseline how federalism, how the United States checks and balances system, how our government works. I am, as a conservative, elated to see people say, no, F this, screw this. We're just going to continue enforcing the border ourselves anyway. So that's how we arrived here over the weekend. Essentially, Texas said, screw you, Joe Biden, screw you, Supreme Court of the United States, screw you, federal government. You are not managing the border. You are failing to uphold your constitutional obligation to do so. So we are going to have to pick up the mess that you have left for us, and we will gladly do so. They decided to double down on their border security efforts as a state, even though they were told by the Supreme Court of the United States, you can't do that. You have to stop. And now we kind of find ourselves this Monday, a week later, in this unprecedented constitutional crisis. Somewhat. I know that sounds so hyperbolic, but actually that is what's happening, is a constitutional crisis. And I have no idea where things are going to go forward from here. Everybody now is just starting to pick this up. So the mainstream media is just starting to pick this up. This is CBS News. Texas doubles down in unprecedented border dispute with the federal government. They called it an unprecedented standoff between the state of Texas and the federal government at the southern border. We have never seen what we are seeing right now. They asked a bunch of immigration attorneys. Never, to the point that we have had the Texas National Guard and agents from the Department of Border Patrol and Security basically blocking the entrance and taking authority or control of the border from the federal government. Nobody has ever seen anything like this before, but it took all week. This happened immediately after the decision was granted on Monday from the Supreme Court. It took all week for the mainstream media to even want to talk about this. Meanwhile, we've all been talking about it on social media, which we're going to get to here in a second. But that article, this Texas doubles down article from CBS News, was published 2 days ago. This was published on Saturday. It took 6 days for the mainstream media to even pay attention that the state of Texas was giving the metaphorical middle finger, sometimes literal, I suppose, back to the federal government, and that individual people are starting to join in the fight. So everybody on social media has been talking about this, and I think that's worth reacting to, because all of you might scream and gnash your teeth and roll your eyes every single time I talk about the importance of TikTok as a platform, but TikTok is the reason that information like this is even at the forefront of the national conversation, because CBS News, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Times, The New York Post, none of them are talking about this until 6 days later, but almost instantaneously, everyone on social media started calling this imminent civil war and a constitutional crisis. So let's see what the people of the internet had to say about it.
So if you haven't heard yet, there's a major crisis happening right now on the U.S. side of the Texas-Mexico border. Basically, in short, what happened is Biden said, open your borders. We're going to turn this state park into an open border for immigrants to come through. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott said, no, you're not.
No, you're not. I love this. And by the way, I just love that news can be spread like this. Like, it doesn't have to be so serious all the time. This is a girl in the passenger seat of her car, hanging out. You can't see her hoodie, but she's wearing a hoodie. Hanging out, just talking to a friend about this, essentially.
I'm not doing that. I'm not opening my park. Where is the federal government's authority to make that decision? So, Governor Greg Abbott sent his Texas National Guard to that state park and instead started putting up more barbed wire along that border so immigrants actually couldn't get in, blocking instead of allowing the border to open, the exact opposite of President Joe Biden's instructions. So the Supreme Court looked at Greg Abbott and said, hey, Bestie, you actually can't do that because that's not the state's authority. It's a federal government decision. So you're going to need to back off. And Greg Abbott said, I'm not doing that. So there's a lot of tension right now.
Again, highly more effective in getting the exact same information out there. I'm way more entertained watching this girl than I ever would be watching MSNBC.
The real problem started when 26 other Republican governors from other states said, we're standing behind Greg Abbott and we support that decision to close.
We're going to come back to this map here in just a second, but this is why everybody thinks that a civil war is imminently happening.
The border. Unfortunately, it is not a state decision, it is a federal decision, and states don't have the choice to do that.
True.
But they're doing it anyway.
So you might not like that, but like legally speaking, the states don't have the existing opportunity, let alone obligation to do this. That's not how our Constitution of the United States was written. Perhaps we should amend it. I would be all for that. But now they're saying, screw this, we're doing it anyway.
Now, what does this all mean? Well, it's not good. The federal government has given Texas a Friday deadline to allow the federal government into the park to let them open that border.
That was last Friday. We don't really have an update since then.
If they don't, the federal government is going to send national troops down to stop the Texas National Guard. But the problem is these other states have said, Greg Abbott, we got your back. We will send our National Guard down to also help you. It's a big conflict here. Fingers crossed Texas just lays down. At this point, we're all just hoping for a peaceful resolution, but we're going to have to see definitely a conflict going on in the United States. Keep an eye out, watch the news. Good luck if you're in Texas.
Texas AG Ken Paxton has sued the federal government after agents used forklifts to suspend razor wire in the air along the border to wave more than 300 migrants illegally into Texas.
Okay, do you guys see that? Do you see this image right above me? Literally what they are doing is the federal government took a forklift, construction equipment, to lift up the razor wire that the Texas state government put in to let 300 people just walk across the border. How effed up is that? Like, I genuinely cannot wrap my head around how messed up it is that our federal government, Border Patrol, just erased our border immediately. And then they're blaming Texas for being the bad guys. That's insane.
Federal Judge Aaliyah Moses handed Texas a win in this lawsuit, saying the Biden administration must stop disassembling, degrading, tampering at the southern border.
That was, of course, before the Supreme Court of the United States told the state of Texas that they have to stop.
Texas is punching back at the Biden administration by putting up storage containers as a makeshift wall at the southern border. Your president hates you.
So you mean to
True, the president does hate us. Here, let me scoot this one up for you guys.
tell me it's the first month of the year, we off to a great start, and Joe
Amen.
Biden decided, let me go into a civil war with Texas? This cannot be. Who is this? If you're not already tapped in, keep watching, because this might affect you. So basically in Texas, there is a wire that passes through the border, and it basically passes through Eagle Pass, Shelby Park. And the wire obviously is basically stopping people from trying to migrate to Texas. But my boy Joe Biden in the Supreme Court said, nah, that shit cooked. I don't know why, but he went to go send his goons to cut off the wire. But what turned everything upside down is the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, said, nah, little bro, you ain't doing that. My boy
Greg Abbott, but this guy's hilarious.
Greg is standing on straight border business. He got his goons with him too. Not only did he tell the Border Patrol and the Supreme Court that they not cutting our wire, but he also pulled out receipts and said that the Texas constitutional rights say that they cannot let any migrants in. Now we in a standoff, but this is where everything turns left. No pun intended. So right now, majority of the states are siding with Texas.
Again, we're going to come back to that map, so don't freak out. We will come back to the map.
And they basically saying, nah, we stand with Greg. In conclusion, if we cannot all come into one agreement, we might have to go into a civil war. For y'all that still don't understand how crazy this sounds, the last time we were in a civil war was 1865. You remember the books you used to read in American history? The movies you used to watch on the American Civil War? We about to be the next movie.
Maybe. Meanwhile, how we even got here is just mind-boggling to me. This video was taken on December 27th, or at least posted on December 27th. And it's perhaps, experts are saying, the largest single caravan of illegal immigrants that are coming to the United States all at once. So that was a month ago. Allegedly, all of these people are arriving to the United States this month and next month. But these are all people coming to America right now to illegally immigrate to our country right now. That is asinine to me. And I'm sorry, but forgive my youthful ignorance when they zoomed in here. I don't see a lot of families in this crowd. I don't see a lot of helpless children in this crowd, which does exist. That does happen, and that's horrifying. And we're going to talk about that today toward the end of the stream. But who do you mostly see in this caravan, in these crowds of people? Answer that for yourself. All coming here right now. Yikes. Look at that. That is a ridiculous number of people. A truly insane number of people. All at the same time. This is quite literally an invasion into our country. Like, nobody wants to use that word. But if this is not an invasion into the United States of America, I genuinely cannot comprehend what is. If this is not an invasion of military-aged men into our country, what is? What is? There's a family. It honestly is it's breaking my heart because nobody is really talking about this the way that we need to. Nobody is drawing, oops, I don't know what happened. Nobody's drawing attention to this the way that we need to be talking about it. Instead, we're all watching it happen. We're all watching this unfold in real time. We're talking about it on social media every single day. But nobody wants to even call this what it is, which is just straight up an invasion into your country. If this was happening at any other border on the other side of the world, like, I don't know, Ukraine, for one, we would be calling this an invasion. But we're not, because it's the United States of America. So again, that video was posted on December 27th. Those people probably are already here, if not very, very well on their way here to the United States of America. And a new study dropped last week showing that over 6 million people have already been let into the United States of America illegally under President Joe Biden's disastrous border policies, or I suppose lack thereof of any border policy. My parents and I were talking about this over the weekend. My parents are both attorneys, so it's fun for us to explore the legal questions of like what the heck could possibly happen moving forward, because we are in an unprecedented legal and constitutionally legal situation. And my dad made a really great point. He said there's been 6 million people let in illegally by the Biden administration over the last 3.5 years or so. If just 1% of them were gang members, were cartel members, were terrorists from the Middle East, of which many of the people walking across our southern border currently are. Nobody wants to talk about that. That's not the politically correct thing to say, but we all saw that video that went mega viral last week of an Azerbaijani terrorist at the southern border saying, "You don't know who I am yet, but you're going to know very, very soon." If 1% of those 6 million people were cartel members, were gang members, or were terrorists, that's what? 60,000 people that have come to America in the last 3.5 years with the sole intention of creating chaos, of creating terror, of illegally smuggling in arms, of illegal drug trafficking, of human trafficking, with the aim of murdering people or raping people or creating mass terrorist incidences. If just 1% of those 6 million people were here on that motive alone, that's 60, 70,000 people in the last 3.5 years alone. And then when you see images like this, it's hard to imagine, what if that 1% is so much bigger? What if that 1% is 5% or 10% or 20% or, God forbid, 50%? We have already created an unprecedented situation for how to deal with the ramifications of our lack of a border, because I don't know how we're going to handle 6 million people here illegally in our country, how they possibly move forward from here, either under another term with Biden, under another term with Trump, or under a term with Michelle Obama, which looks more and more likely every single day. Actually, I think we all know how that would be handled under Michelle Obama. But now what about the next 6 million people in the next year and a half? Because it seems to just be getting crazier and crazier by the minute. So Texas says F you to the federal government. We don't care that constitutionally we can't do anything as a state. We don't care that you are supposed to have the obligation to do something to prevent an invasion into our country. We don't care that the federal government has the sole obligation to protect our border under the Constitution of the United States. We're just going to do it ourselves. And before we dive into all the nitty gritty, I just have to say the memes on the subject have been absolutely incredible on TikTok in particular. We got to watch these together because they are just so good. Texas announces, hey, we're going to do this thing. We're going to keep protecting the border. All be damned. Consequences be damned. And everybody else can just be angry about it. People from all over the country decide they want to help, states and people alike. So right now, nobody's talking about this in the mainstream media, but as we speak, over 700,000 truckers and their trucks are driving in a convoy to the southern border in order to support the state of Texas in defending the border.
1,000 trucks on their way to Texas right now as you're watching this video. And here is what you guys need to know about this. The GOP has invoked nullification in the border standoff between the U.S. and Texas. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, but just hear me out. Over 6 million people have entered America illegally since Joe Biden has become president. That is more than 2% of the U.S. population. For hundreds of years, there has been a process on how illegal immigration works and how people can enter the U.S. However, what we're seeing is absolutely absurd. I am all for helping other people out, but at the end of the day, we need to look out for America first. We have to open our eyes and see what is really happening in America. And we do not have the resources to just let millions and millions of people in every year. No country can do that and be sustainable. It just doesn't happen. So buckle up, everyone, because this weekend is going to be crazy.
So February 3rd, which is Saturday, apparently 700,000 trucks and truckers and individual people, citizens of the United States, are all driving to the southern border with Texas, which is a lot of area. I would imagine they're probably gathering in like El Paso. That makes the most sense. If you've ever driven through El Paso, the border is right freaking there in Texas. And they're all just going to say, what can we do to help? And the energy that I have seen on TikTok with people making memes about this to defend the state of Texas and defend the United States border are legendary.
Follow me to stay updated on everything that's happening.
That I love is falling under attack. A mighty sucker punch came flying in from somewhere in the back. Soon as we could see clearly through our big black eye, man, we lit up your world like the 4th of July.
Should we go back? Should we go back and watch that? I'm going to turn myself off just so you can watch Michael Scott by himself because it's just that good. Hang on. We'll watch it again. Oh, man, it's so good. Here we go.
That I love is falling under attack. A mighty sucker punch came flying in from somewhere in the back. Soon as we could see clearly through our big black eye, man, we lit up your world like the 4th of July.
Oh, I know I'm going to get copyrighted for that one, but damn, that is just funny. And then there's this other meme template going really viral right now about people doing like the side eye for things that they shouldn't want, but really, really want. Check this one out.
I believe in miracles.
I know I'm going to get copyrighted, but it's okay.
You sexy thing, you. I believe in miracles.
For those that don't get it, that is the ability of the state of Texas essentially to secede from the Union, which now I guess everybody thinks is going to happen, apparently. So the big question that's in front of us right now is, will Texas and these 25 other states that have signed on to support them in this standoff with the federal government continue giving the middle finger to the feds and say, no, you're not doing your job, we're going to do our job? How does that escalate? Does that look like seceding from the Union? Does that look like waiting for somebody to fire the first shot? Do we have like an Alamo 2.0 situation on our hands? If you ask any Texans in the chat, speak up. If you ask any Texan what you think should happen, in your opinion, almost every single one of you are going to say, I'm so proud to be a Texan right now. Go Texas. Do not back down. Alex just said in the chat, we as Texas definitely shouldn't secede. With the classic Pointer Brothers side eye. I mean, it's funny because Texans are like, screw this. This is just absolutely ridiculous. And somebody has to keep speaking up about this, right? Any Texans in the chat? Texas forever. Jared says, go Texas from Nebraska. Nakash says, go Texas from New York City. Chris says, come and take it. Celeste says, I'm a Texan living in Colorado, and if they secede, I'm going to go back. Well, there you go. That tells you literally everything. Ron says, let's secede with Texas. I'm a Floridian. So there's a big appetite for something like this. Z Pallone says, can we just give Austin back first? Well, there you go. Emily says, Texas needs to set the standard. Jimmy says, go Texas from Canada. There you go. There you go. Al Meister says, happy to be a Texan living in Illinois. If shit hits the fan, then I'm heading back. Wow. This is big. Silver Eagle says Alabama stands with Texas. B says standing with Texas from communist California. Soha says love from Paris. There you go. Nikki says go Texas from Illinois. I would just move there. BZ says go Texas from Arizona. AJ says, I'm joining the army, but I'm worried about I'm worried about them sending us to fight Texas because I support Texas. Okay, AJ, remind me, I'm putting a pin in that, and I'm going to come back to this conversation because I had this exact conversation, sorry, I'm shaking this, with my fiance over the weekend. So everybody's wondering Is this finally the moment that Texas is just going to say, screw this, it's not worth it, we're going to go be our own country now, which has been a long-running joke in America throughout my entire lifetime, but now honestly kind of seems like a remote possibility. And now 25 other states have signed on to back Texas and support Texas should the feds continue neglecting the obligation to manage the border, including sending National Guard troops from every single one of their states to the border with Texas to defend the border of the United States of America, because our own Border Patrol and the nationalized National Guard certainly isn't doing that. Our military certainly isn't doing that. We would rather go and defend the borders of Ukraine than we would the borders of the United States of America. So that's where this map comes into a key play here. So Texas, obviously, and Governor Abbott, right above me, was the first state to say, screw you, we're going to do our own thing now. And almost immediately, a bunch of other commonly red, although some swing states have signed on to support them no matter what, even if that means sending troops to the state of Texas from the National Guard of each one of these states to fight against those who are seeking to invade our country, to fight against those who would seek to abolish the idea of a border at all. Florida, where I currently live right now with Governor Ron DeSantis, has already sent a high number of troops to the border of Texas. South Dakota, who's governed by Kristi Noem, right up there in the middle, has already sent troops to the border. We've got Alaska, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska. We've got Iowa, Missouri, Oklahoma. We've got Arkansas with Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders right over here, who is absolutely phenomenal. The entire South, so this feels oddly reminiscent of another chapter of potentially a civil war in the United States. So Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, shockingly. I don't know why I expected Ohio not to join in on this, but I find that absolutely fascinating. Indiana and New Hampshire. They have all joined together. Oh, and Alaska, of course, because Alaska's the goat. They've all joined together to say, essentially, come at me. Come at us, United States government. What are you going to do? So the question is, what are they going to do? I mean, genuinely, this has never happened before. It has never happened before that I can think of. Any historians out there might be able to tell me otherwise, but to my understanding, it has never happened before, other than the Civil War of the United States, that half of the states in the country have sent state troops to potentially go fight federal troops over an issue of states' rights versus federal rights, other than the Civil War. Texas, interestingly, became a U.S. state in 1845. Prior to that, was an independent country. They were an independent republic. They have kind of a baked-in clause to their state constitution that they theoretically could leave the Union. Unlike any other state, none of the other 50 states have that baked in. Other 49 states have that baked into their state constitutions, but Texas kind of, depending on who you ask, does. So there's renewed calls for Texit, kind of like Brexit, or Texas leaving the Union of the United States of America. And Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia has said Virginia stands with Texas. Governor DeWine in Ohio says that the situation along the southern border is untenable and just keeps getting worse. Sarah Sanders wrote, Governor Sanders, if Biden won't defend us, states will have to defend themselves. And we know that Ron DeSantis, that Kristi Noem, and others are sending state troops to the border in this newfound standoff. So they gave the states a deadline of Friday. Friday came and went. Nobody in the mainstream media is reporting on any updated news from after the deadline. And everyone wonders what the next light of a match in the powder keg is going to be. So my fiance and I start talking about this over the weekend, and we start theorizing, okay, well, theoretically, could this lead to a civil war? Maybe. I don't think that it actually would. I personally don't think that there is such little calculation from the left in America that they would actually fire a first shot against state troops, that they would weaponize the military against American citizens right before the 2024 election. theoretically, I suppose it's possible, but I don't think that would be a high likelihood. I think if the federal government were to weaponize the military against individual American citizens or against state National Guards, I think half the military just straight up wouldn't want to fight for the federal government anymore. They would leave. They would just leave the military, which I know has consequences, but in a situation of civil war, you would just leave and go fight for the other side, which AJ, you just said a couple of minutes ago in our chat on Instagram. You said, I'm joining the military, but I don't know if I would want to fight for the military. If they told me to go fight Texas, I would probably just go fight Texas. Anybody else in the military have similar things to say? I don't see an outcome here that actually results in armed conflict as of right now, but nobody knows what's going to happen. Literally nobody knows what's going to happen. Then, as Jason reminds us in the Instagram chat, don't forget about citizen Texan militias. What about just citizen militias from all over the country? Because I know several people that have gotten in their car and driven to Texas to just go fight, to just be there. Apparently 700,000 truckers are just showing up to the state of Texas on Saturday, February 3rd, and just dealing with it. So this is wild to me how much this is heating up, and people are actually genuinely wondering if this could lead to a civil war in the United States. It's also bizarre to me that nobody is really talking about the fact that it could become a civil war. The media is talking about, oh, this is a big legal question. This is a big constitutional question. This is a big whatever. But why aren't they talking about troops being deployed to the border? Why aren't they talking about what's happening after the deadline? Why aren't they talking about the theoretical battle that might come out of this? Ordinary people are. Josh says this will be the battle for the Alamo part 2. Actually, there were a lot of funny memes about readying the Alamo for the federal presence there. Red4 says the only federal presence currently down there is the Border Patrol. There's no active duty military that's been deployed to the border. So a conflict of federal troops fighting state troops is unlikely. I would agree with you there right now. But theoretically, a lot of people are saying that maybe the Biden administration will nationalize, federalize the National Guard, which can happen under existing U.S. law. And so all of the troops that were sent down there to the federal or by the states to the Texas border, to the border with Mexico, would all of a sudden become federal troops rather than state troops and have to report to the commander in chief rather than their governor, which is a theoretical possibility. Red 4 then said, unless, of course, Texas decides to storm one of the federal military installations in Texas, then that would lead to a civil war. It just feels very contentious at this moment in time. And I think as the world has already been on the edge of our seat for the last year or so with the potential imminence of a World War III, there is a fascinating potential reality baked into all of this. What happens if America experiences some sort of civil armed conflict right now in 2024? Would a foreign adversary to the United States take advantage of that? I see no better opportunity for China, let's say, to launch a massive EMP attack against the United States than when we're all fighting each other, than when we're all focused on a civil war rather than our foreign enemies. I see no better opportunity for Vladimir Putin to follow through on his press release from 2 weeks ago that they want to take back Alaska to Russia. In case nobody told you that was a thing 2 weeks ago, than if we were all fighting each other. I see no better opportunity for increased terror attacks in the United States by terrorist organizations or foreign agents and militias of Iran, either here on U.S. soil or anywhere else around the world, than if we're all busy fighting each other. And it just feels a little coincidental that we are 9 months away from the next major federal election that feels like the most intense election of our lifetime. And all of this insanity is now unfolding in January of 2024. So I don't know. Do you think it is coincidental? Do you not? Do you think this is going to lead to civil war? Start dropping your guys' thoughts in the chat because I think this is absolutely fascinating. God Plays Chess on Rumble says, the problem is that conservatives had not had a strong backbone in a long time, so the left might assume the right will back down in the game of chicken that they think they are playing. That's fascinating. Wow, that's a big head scratcher always, to be honest with you. Harry says, I couldn't agree more with the China EMP. Thank you, Harry. You get me. This is how my brain works. I am a bit of a tinfoil hat individual, to be honest with you. Scrolling. You guys are arguing a lot in the live chat today. Just be good people. We're just playing the game of tinfoil hat. It's okay. We're allowed to talk about this. TC Moreno on Getter says, Tricky Nikki loves war. There's a thought for you. Magic Def, planned unmitigated chaos. I actually think that is the MO of most of the people in positions of power politically right now. I don't think that they are smart enough to like actually orchestrate some 4D chess situation, or they are smart enough, but they're like shooting themselves in the foot with every passing opportunity. I mean, for God's sake, the president of the United States can't even complete a sentence. So can we really expect there's some deep conspiracy to like attack American citizens? I don't actually think so. There are a lot of people who are saying that. I am not one of them. I think generally the plan is to just create as much chaos as possible. That's why we've allowed 6 million illegal immigrants into our country within the last 3.5 years. That's why we have literally no strategy for how to deal with rising crime and drug addiction and all of the insane, horrible things going on in our cities. I think it is, as you perfectly stated, Magic Def, planned unmitigated chaos. Because what better way to necessitate government control, to necessitate taking away your liberties and freedoms in the name of safety, to necessitate relying on the government, period, than chaos in every situation possible, be it a pandemic, be it crime, be it an invasion, be it a civil war. Crazy Cat Lady says, the majority of people don't want to fight each other. The majority of the people know it's not necessary. But it's the stupid elite government that's the problem. It'll probably turn into something more like the French Revolution instead of a civil war. That word revolution has been thrown around quite a lot lately, is all I'm saying. Adam says, Joe isn't even qualified to make an order at Taco Bell. Well, that's very, very well said, Adam. Oh, man, that's absolutely good stuff. I love that. Nikki says, I've been suspecting a civil war for some time. It seems that there may be a good possibility if the feds continue to not do what they should do for Texas. Trev Atkins says, enemies have been watching for years now as we get weaker and weaker. When one of them finally decides to pull the plug, we are in trouble. Unafraid Life says, this is exactly what the left wants. They want to be the good guys when the right finally strikes back. Ooh, that is fascinating. JJP says, a lot of convertible Americans, I think that means conservative. A lot of conservative Americans, I feel, are ready to fight. People are getting sick of being treated like second-class citizens. I really need another cup of coffee. And they know that they won't win legally. Josh W. for real says, what the left doesn't realize is that most Texans have guns. Shelby says, I hope the feds see how strongly Americans feel about this and let Texas put the wire back up. I would think so, but I think they see how strongly we feel about it and they just don't actually care. And here's the real takeaway with all of this, no matter how this continues unfolding, and the story that I hope doesn't get lost in translation and that I hope continues to be covered by citizen journalists on social media and the mainstream media alike. It's me says they already have enough people within our borders for them to attack us from the inside. And Emma just said, this is the plan, and it's exactly what I've been trying to tell my delusional generation. This is terrible. There have been people speaking up about the border, speaking up about what happens next from here, speaking up about the chaos that's been insinuated by our federal government at every possible turn since Joe Biden was inaugurated as the president, since January of 2021. There's been a lot of good people saying, as often as we can, these people have a plan to essentially destroy America from the inside out. And again, I don't know if it's as calculated or as premeditated or as 4D chess strategy as most people would like to give them credit for. I think it really starts with just creating as much chaos as humanly possible and letting the chips fall as they may. After that, to mandate and necessitate additional government control, to have the government stabilize our society, to have the government come in and clean everything up, whether that government is our or D, whether that government is red or blue. It's the same people that have been in power since long before I was ever even a forethought in my parents' mind, let alone born. So, as Johnny just said on Instagram, these are not mistakes. The things that are happening right before our very eyes are not mistakes. These are very intentional realities that people have been thinking about the long game for a very, very long time. And this is true for endless policy applications in the United States. If you look at the downfall of education, that was a long premeditated step-by-step effort by people who could see the bigger picture 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road, that we no longer teach history, that we teach critical race theory, that we're trying to turn your kids trans, that kids are getting sexually assaulted in the bathroom at school. This didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a mistake that we suddenly ended up here. It was the concentrated effort of a handful of people who slowly planted seeds that would take a long time to take root, but eventually would turn into reality. You can say the same thing about the entertainment industry. You can say the same thing about the church in America. You can say the same thing about our national border and our lack of border security and just about anything else under the purview of the government. This has been a long time effort to simply create chaos and necessitate additional government control. Eventually, and I think we got a small taste of this in 2020, but eventually people can only be pushed so far before they break. And I don't want to see America in a situation of a civil war. That would be my worst nightmare. None of us want to see that, right? That would be terrible. Nobody wants to see brothers fighting brothers. Nobody wants to see everybody feel the need to take up arms and fight against our own government. Nobody wants that to happen. Maybe some people do. I certainly don't. But it begs the question, at what point does society at large, and I'm not saying take up arms, I want to be very clear about that, but at what point does society at large snap? Like, how far are we going to keep pushing people before people completely snap? Everybody likes to joke. Niskosh says on Instagram, it all started with that damn gorilla that got shot. Rest in peace, Harambe. You're a real one. Everybody likes to joke that Harambe sent the world into like insane pandemonium. That was the reset on civilization. But actually, there probably was a moment, not Harambe, most likely, although I suppose it's possible. There was a moment where the powers that be sat down in a room and said, okay, what's our end goal? What is the end goal to destroy Western civilization as we know it? It's going to take a really long time, but how are we going to get there? And they mapped it out. An invasion into our country, complete control over our healthcare, trying to mitigate what words we can and can't say or even think based on community guidelines and hate speech rules and getting you kicked off your college campus, putting pornographic books in elementary schools, trying to trans your children, investigating you as a domestic terrorist if you go to Sunday Mass every week. I'm sure I'm on like 20,000 lists, by the way, and I'm very proud of it. These people have created a system that is a two-tiered system, but I think in the end is designed to destroy our country. You guys know I just wrote my second book. It's hiding behind my head right over there. You guys should pre-order it in the description of this video because I need more pre-orders, so help me out. But I just wrote my second book. It's coming out on March 19th, and as I was reading the audiobook last week, I read the whole thing in 2 days, and my voice still is recovering. But as I was reading my book, I had forgotten that a big part in one chapter was talking about the history of our nation's leaders, reminding us from George Washington all the way through that if America was ever to be truly destroyed, it would never come from an outside adversary. It wouldn't come from another nation. It wouldn't come from a terrorist group. It would come from within. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And if America truly was to fall, according to all of the great thinkers of our country's past, it would have to fall from within. I have to believe that is the intention behind the people creating as much chaos as possible. If not, it's just for the sake of creating chaos, which doesn't feel quite as organized to me as it should. But keep that in mind. Keep that in mind with the people that you're looking for to be a leader. Be that your congressman or your senator or the president of the United States or even just a member of your local school board. Keep that in mind when you read these headlines and you watch the news and you think over and over again, why is this happening? How could this be happening? Who allowed this to happen? Keep that in mind when you ask yourself, what can I do? What can I as one individual do to try to stop the madness, in Phoebe's voice from Friends, stop the madness from taking over society? Only in America was the idea born that one individual citizen could stand up to tyranny. And that if enough individual citizens stand up to tyranny together, we have a fighting chance. Particularly if enough young punk rock patriots give the middle finger to the establishment politics that have continued to drive our society into the ground and stamp out human flourishing, we have an opportunity to revolutionize and redefine the world. We all have an opportunity to speak up against this stuff. You don't have to get in a truck and drive to Texas this weekend, although I'm sure some of you probably will. But we all have an opportunity to speak up, to repost videos about it, to react to stuff, to share links with our family and friends, to do something, to say something. And we've neglected that responsibility and that opportunity for far too long on other subjects. I don't want to see this conflict continue escalating, although it's a potential that that happens. But whether it's this issue or the next one or the next one or the next one, what can you do to speak up? 25 states have figured out a way to speak up. I don't necessarily agree with how they're upset about the Supreme Court decision. Go back to the beginning if you just are tuning in. But I do agree America is at a breaking point. America is about to snap. And none of us want to see what happens when that happens. So what can we do to try to hold this crazy experiment called the United States of America that's worth fighting for together? It's up to you to answer the call. All right, you guys. That was a great conversation. Thanks for weighing in throughout the stream on the live chat. Before we go, jump over to Locals for our post-stream Q&A. Please, please, please do me a huge favor and smash that like button if you have not already. That could look like a thumbs up or a heart, depending on where you are watching. And most importantly, smash that follow or subscribe button to help us continue growing these communities every single day. Last thing I want to say, what a blessed mess said in our chat just now. They are dividing us on purpose. They are. They're trying to make this seem like a crazy civil war is imminent on purpose. They want us to feel like there is no option than a civil war on purpose. They want us to feel like our country is gone already, that it's not worth fighting for anymore, that there isn't any common ground that we can find each other on. I hope and pray that I can use the platform that I have, but you guys as well, to try to bring people together again, to have hard conversations, to have an interesting change of perspective in your life every once in a while, but more importantly, to try to bring everybody towards the truth. The truth might not be the flashiest, most vogue, fitting in with society thing to say every day, but if we can collectively promise to find the truth, to seek the truth, and to share it with others, I think we will still have a leg to stand on in keeping us a United States of America moving forward rather than a divided country on the brink of civil war. So very well said. What a blessed mess. You guys, we're back for the stream tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, on Facebook, on Rumble, on Getter, and on Instagram. Locals, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.